Tony Martignetti, nonprofit radio coverage of 18 NTC, the Nonprofit Technology Conference in New Orleans. This interview is sponsored by Network for Good, easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. And my guest is Steve Heye. He's a solution consultant at NetSuite. Welcome, Steve Heye.
Thank you. Welcome.
Pleasure. Well, you don't have to welcome me to my own show.
Whoa. I feel welcome.
You're welcome. You feel welcome. Oh, good. You are genuinely welcome. Your seminar topic is capacity is more than a buzzword.
Yep.
All right. That's short, but I feel like there's a lot in there.
It is.
What are we talking about when we say capacity? What do you mean?
Yeah, and that was the whole point of the session. The whole point of the session was
it varies depending on where you're sitting, and
yeah, there's so many definitions of capacity. Everybody talks about it differently. So the idea of the session was to really walk through all the different ways that people talk about capacity, how you can measure it, how you act on it when you know what it is, and so one of the key things was providing context to the word capacity. So the only way you can really talk about capacity is by putting something in front of it. Like if you think about a car, it has seating capacity. Or if you think about a truck, it has towing capacity.
All right.
So that was a lot of our framework.
So what are some things that might go in front of it? Acquisition capacity, fundraising capacity?
So fundraising capacity is a good example. Organizational capacity, program capacity, financial capacity, technical. So we did spend quite a bit of time on technology capacity. So around, do you have the right systems, the right operations, the right technology, the right tech staff, the skills, all. So there's, layers to how you can talk about capacity within an organization to meet their mission.
All right. What with this being the Nonprofit Technology Conference, I feel like we should start with technology capacity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a phrase I've never heard. I've heard those two words, never put together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to make sure you know that our listeners are large, over 12,000, but
Great.
They're in small and mid-sized nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
So they may very well not have any devoted technology staff.
Correct.
Now, they probably,
Right.
I'm sure they still have some technology capacity.
Right.
And we're going to help them try to measure it.
Right.
And we'll flesh it out more, because I can't even think about other things to say about it right now, but I'll know more in about 20 minutes.
Exactly.
Okay, but so, very good chance they don't have dedicated technology staff.
Right.
They're outsourcing everything that they need, or they're piecing it together through their executive director and maybe, an office manager or something.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Technology capacity.
Yep.
Okay, what is that?
So the one thing to think about is the technical capacity. So do you have someone on staff that knows enough to be able to talk to the vendors you work with and to be able to do the right sort of planning so that you at least understand the systems you have and the needs you have? So it's a simple term of technical capacity, meaning you know the right questions to ask, you have a person driving the strategy, you have somebody making the decisions around your technology. And so one of the things that we do at my work is we donate software.
Yes, through social impact.
Yes, and so what my role is, before we donate the software, what we want to do is ask a simple set of questions to see if they have enough technical capacity to be able to implement the software.
Oh, I know how you fit into this, because I had Peggy DeVette on the show.
Yes.
Just maybe 2 months ago or so. You could, if you missed that one, you could go to TonyMartignetti.com and you could search her last name, Duvette.
Yep.
And you can listen to how Oracle NetSuite Social Impact has all kinds of free, not only product, but also consulting to go along with that to help you build your capacity.
Correct.
To use the product that you will get from Social Impact, from Oracle NetSuite Social Impact. So you could go back and listen to that. Okay, so now Steve Heye, you fit in determining whether an organization has the capacity in a technical side.
Yeah, correct.
To use what your company so generously donates.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So how do you measure it?
So so one of the challenges we had all kinds of grand ideas of how to measure it. So we had all these thoughts around really deep interviews and but all of those things take time. So what we ended up doing is we came up with a very simple set of 12 questions, and they're all kind of very high-level questions, but give us a set of information. For example, we ask, do you have a tech plan?
Are these questions answered online?
Yes, it's a form that they fill out as they apply.
So you're building your capacity
Yep.
for intake to the donation program through Social Impact.
Correct. Yep.
You are. Congratulations.
Because we had our own constraints.
You're walking your walk. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So it was one question is, do you have a tech plan? One is, do you have an IT staff? And most people say no, but the second answer is, no, we don't, but we have a volunteer that has a lot of tech skills that helps us a lot. Another question was around how much time are you willing to commit to the project? How much do you have financial understanding, accounting, and those kind of questions?
Right, because the software can take on financial management.
Right, and I just use this as one example of measuring technical capacity. And so then the idea is, okay, now we understand our capacity. Where do we have gaps? And then what are some creative ways to fill that? So for a nonprofit to think about their technical capacity, it's simple to just sit down and look at it. And then if you decide, go ahead.
Okay, I got to stop you for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
What if an organization is not planning to apply to Oracle NetSuite Social Impact for a donation?
Yep.
Can they still use these questions? I mean, how would they manage or measure their technical capacity?
So our questions are pretty specific to our program. If an organization, I think, is looking to measure their own, I would look at the NTEN. NTEN just launched a new technical capacity survey as well. And that one is much more broad and open.
Okay.
So I would look to something like that for a more generic one. The example I use is just to illustrate why you would measure it and what you would do with it afterwards.
One way of measuring.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the NTEN technical capacity survey, you can find it at NTEN.org.
Yes, correct.
Okay, technical capacity.
Yep. And that's a new one that they've just launched, and it kind of helps you get a clear picture of the technical capacity of your full organization as a whole, and then gives you, when you take the survey, it'll spit out results afterwards of, oh, you were a little short here, go read this book. Here, oh, you were short here, here's a website you should go visit. So it gives a set of recommendations as well, so that once you understand your capacity, now you have a set of actions to follow up on as well.
Okay.
So theirs is much more public. Ours is for a very specific purpose.
Yes.
So that was a key part of our whole presentation. What my presentation on capacity was, before you even talk about capacity, the key is to understand what capacity are you trying to understand, what goal do you have once you understand your capacity, and that would help you determine what type of assessment to do. So for example, if your goal was to increase your outcomes, your program outcomes, so you want to be more effective in the work you do to meet your mission, that would probably mean you would need to do like two different assessments. One is organizational effectiveness. How well do your staff work, and how clear are their goals, and is it tied to the outcomes? Versus a resource assessment to figure out, do you have the right funding? Do you have the right revenue streams to support the right staff? And then do those staff have the right skills? So tying those two things together then allows you to determine what needs to change in order to have more outcomes from your organization.
Okay. Boy, that's a mouthful.
It's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. I got to take a little digression. So what is your work? So now, are you strictly devoted to measuring the capacity of potential grantees for the social impact program?
So no, I do two things. One is I design the assessments that we use to figure out their capacity.
You designed that survey, that online survey. Okay.
And then I design the interventions that go with it. So once we have their assessment, then we figure out what path they need to go down and what they need to get ready to be able to implement the software. And then once they're implemented, I figure out, if there's this capacity, we create interventions along the way to help them grow in their capacity so that they're more successful in what they're trying to do.
Okay. Like, I know a standard part of the program is there's a monthly webinar for grantees. Do I have that right?
So there's quarterly pro bono, and then there's regular opportunities to get help and assistance, yes. So
I thought there was something, webinar. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure about that.
I do a lot of interviews. Okay. You're being kind. It doesn't exist. Not only are you not sure about it, it doesn't exist. I just realized your hoodie is branded.
Oh, yeah.
You're branded with NetSuite.
It's our old logo, but it's the old.
Oh, right. It doesn't say Oracle on it. Oh, right. That's the old NetSuite.
That's the old one.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We got a good amount of time together.
Yeah.
How do we?
So what I'd love to talk about unless you were going to take it somewhere.
Please go ahead. This is a little abstruse for me.
Yes, absolutely. That was the whole purpose of the session, was because when people talk about capacity, it's such a buzzword that it means nothing.
Like this whole session, if we're not careful, belongs in jargon jail.
It is. The whole thing was jargon jail, and that's what really. The way I've structured the session was I first talked about. There are standard models of doing organizational capacity assessment. McKinsey has one. There's an organization called LISC that has one that's called CapMap. And then there's an organization called I think it's the Unity Foundation, and they have a model. So it's a very purposeful driven model, and they measure it in different ways. So you can do a capacity assessment as a self-assessment where every staff person kind of takes a survey, you look at a very quantitative way to figure out what your capacity looks like that way. And then you can benchmark yourself against others that have taken the same survey. Or what they do is usually give you a report that says, here's your capacity, here's the actions you need to take, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses.
Damn, that's quite an algorithm. How do they figure all that out?
Yeah, and then that's why you should leave something like that to the professionals, because I don't know.
Okay. You are a professional. I mean, you designed a 12-question survey.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah. So we really scaled ours
yeah,
down.
You're touching at the perimeters of this, but oh my gosh, I mean, all right. So what are the factors that go in? Well, it depends what kind of capacity you're measuring. But,
yes.
I mean, we got to break it down.
So I can break it down. So we had a list of 6 things.
So is it really, hold your list.
Yeah.
Hold your list, because it sounds like something interesting.
Yeah.
But is it really worthless to say the phrase organizational capacity?
It's useless. It doesn't mean anything. Yes.
It factors in all these different capacities.
Right.
That it's so broad, it really is unhelpful.
Right.
And organizational capacity for what? For what? That's my follow-up question. Yeah. Capacity for what? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that was one of my biggest struggles was as I walk around, the vendor booth and I would go to sessions and I hear people and, all of these vendors and stuff will have like capacity building initiatives. So what does that mean? And how does the nonprofit actually act on that? It just becomes, like other words that people throw around that are just buzzwords, and it doesn't have enough of a meaning. So that was my goal, was to really actually give it a meaningful context.
Thank you. Okay, now I see how worthless it is to talk about organizational capacity. Okay.
It really is.
All right. You had your clickbait, and I'm clicking 6 list of 6.
Yeah. So when those 3 surveys, when they would do their type of assessment, they kind of keyed in on key areas. One was leadership and governance. So that's the top level. Do you have the right leadership? Do you have the right board structure? Because that really drives a lot of things. The second level then was around, do you have the right strategy and plan? And then the third was like program delivery. The fourth was around the right staff and structure to do that part. And then the last was resources, and the last was the final one was systems.
Okay. The penultimate was resources.
Yes.
The ultimate was
I kept saying last,
systems.
but it wasn't the last one because that was my 6th.
The penultimate. Right.
Yes.
The penultimate. All right.
Correct.
Okay. So we have these 6 areas. Okay, so these are the categories that these tools that you mentioned, like the McKinsey, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
This is what they're surveying.
Yeah.
They're breaking down into
different layers. Yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
different layers of capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then
so that's broader. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So when you take those 6, then it becomes much more meaningful to talk about capacity, because if you break those down, you take the first 2, for example, leadership and governance, and strategy and planning. If you do an assessment on that to see how effective you are at at creating a strategy, driving towards your mission, and then does the board actually have the right governance structure and the leadership have the right tools in place to actually make changes that build your ability to meet those things. So it becomes more meaningful rather than talking about organizational capacity, which is such a fluffy word that means nothing. When you get into the details of, does your leadership do the right things to move you closer to meeting your mission?
Okay, so now you're talking about tying the capacity goals to your plan.
Yes.
Well, to your organization.
Yes, exactly.
And then to your organization as it exists, and then you need a plan for filling the gap between what you need and what you have.
Yes.
To reach the capacity that you're striving for.
Right.
Okay. Does that make sense? Do those sentences make sense that I just said?
They make sense, yes,
okay.
absolutely.
All right. Okay, but, all right, so if you don't have you need one of these tools. You need some kind of professional. You said that earlier.
Yeah.
This is where you bring in the professionals. You really need some help in measuring your capacity in whatever, through whatever channel you want to talk about.
Correct.
That you're concerned about.
Yes.
And if you're concerned about your whole organization, then it's these 6 sound like the place to start. But yeah, you need help with this.
Right. And but I think it's in a large organization, you really, really need help. If you're small and you only have 6 staff, what this really boils down to is simple questions, because then you don't need the complex questions, because you don't have 8 departments to interview, you don't have 100 staff, you don't have this big unknown kind of presence. From my wife's organization that is no full-time staff, they just have a couple, like 8 part-time staff. They're never going to need an organizational capacity assessment. They know what they can and can't do. But so at that level, what they need to acknowledge though is, do they have a strategic plan? Do they have a mission statement? Do they have a vision statement? Is their board engaged? And asking some simple questions like that, and then doing it on a quarterly basis, and then actually investing in that and finding someone that can maybe come in on a pro bono basis and just provide an outside opinion of whether things are going well or not on that organizational top level leadership. Because I think with small organizations, what tends to happen is obviously they don't need this 100 question assessment, but what they do need is to have somebody tell them if they're spending enough time strategically thinking versus just meeting today's needs. So that's where we really spent that second half of our session, was we were focused in on, I gave an analogy. So the analogy I used was beer. So my whole session was beer themed. My slides had beer on it. I gave away beer during my session. It was really fun.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It was an icebreaker. So the idea was I gave somebody a beer. I said, here, hold this beer. And then I threw a ball to them and told them to catch the ball. They were able to catch the ball. And then I did it again. And then somebody in the audience says, well, why don't they set down their beer so they can catch the ball easier? And so I was like, oh, that's a great question. I was hoping somebody would ask that, and that was the whole idea for the exercise. And I said, the reason that you don't want to set down your beer is what we want to do is pretend the beer is your mission. And what often happens at a small nonprofit is we put all of our capacity into catching the everyday balls. We set down our beer, which is our mission, and nobody ever takes enough time to really think about how do we meet the 1-year goal, the 3-year goal, and the 5-year goal. What changes do we need to make today? So, for example, go back to my wife's small nonprofit. They wanted, in 5 years from now, they wanted to be able to have my wife retire as the founder. But as an unpaid executive director, you can't hire another executive director and tell them it's a free job.
Yeah.
So she's like, well, if I want to retire, I need to be able to pay an executive director. So, but in order to do that, I need to have more students in our program. And in order to have more students in our program, I need to have a second studio. But in order to have a second studio, I need to have a better staff set of skills so that I can handle capacity, because I don't have enough people in my organization to handle more students. So she worked backwards from there and figured out which capacity she needed to start with fixing. And what she needed to start with was management. So she took her executive director role, started to break it into an admin role, a program role, and an executive director role, which usually doesn't happen at tiny nonprofits. Usually it has one leader and they control all the power, and it's that founder syndrome of, oh, I'm in charge. And then what happens over time, though, is that when that founder leaves, you have that, oh my gosh, there's a huge hole. So she saw the capacity need of, okay, at the leadership level and strategy level, it can't be me.
Break this up.
We're going to spread the beer around. Everybody's going to have a cup full of beer, and we're all going to hold the mission and hold on to it together. And we're each going to share a part of it. So I think that's the difference between what's needed at a tiny organization versus a large one. If you're complicated, if you have a lot of politics, a lot of messiness, you need someone from the outside to come in with a very rigid, tested, nice framework to help you evaluate your capacity at the leadership level. At a small one, usually it's just having coffee with a friend that understands this, coming to a conference like this, and having somebody just sit down and you share what you do.
Give you a beer and throw balls at you.
Yes, exactly. So the way my wife did it was she went to a dance studio owner conference, because she's a nonprofit dance studio. She had other studio owners tell her and do an evaluation of how she was working. So she benchmarked against them. She told them how she was doing, and they're like, oh, you're doing this wrong in the leadership level. So it was a peer evaluation rather than a formal evaluation.
Yeah. All right. Well, first of all, shout out the name of the organization.
Oh, my wife's organization is called Leap of Faith Arts Ministries. So it's a very small nonprofit in the Chicagoland area.
Okay. All right. So this is very helpful, because we're breaking it down now for smaller organizations.
Yeah.
There's a good degree of self-assessment. I mean, introspection going on.
Yes.
I mean, there are a lot of founders who would not be willing to divide their job up the way your wife did into 3 parts.
And that's a real struggle, because you're putting all the burden on one person, which is great because that one person is there for a reason. They're really good at their job and they do it well. So it makes sense to have them keep all of that stuff. But at the same time, you're not building long-term capacity for that organization, because when the founder leaves, then the whole org dies.
Yeah, and it's also not healthy for all these different functions to be in to
Right.
be in one place. Just
No.
because even if the founder doesn't leave or doesn't die, well,
Eventually
will.
they go on vacation.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, if getting to the next level, which I hear a lot,
Right.
how do I do it, is important to you.
Yes.
Then having a founder or maybe two people, maybe it's not literally just one, but
Right.
one or two people holding all the keys,
Yeah,
all the power,
exactly.
all the potential for the organization is unhealthy. It's limiting.
a detriment.
And
Yes.
of course. Yeah. So
Yeah. And so that was that.
start assessing, start looking inward, introspection.
Yes, and figuring out where the consolidation of power is, so that
Yeah.
you can spread it out, so that more people are involved. So then we continue the conversation to a much more tactical level. So we ended with, all right, so if we want to be able to spend more time thinking capacity, thinking strategy, thinking leadership, the only way we can do that is to stop doing other things. So you need to be able to sit down and go, okay, where am I spending my time that isn't helping the mission? What tasks am I doing? What tasks is my staff doing?
Yeah, more introspection.
Right. So then you look down and you go, okay, well, wow, we are spending a lot of time on our finances, or we're spending a lot of time tracking our donors, or we're spending a lot of time tracking manual pieces of paper for our students, doing registration, So you start to take those things that there are systems and ways to automate those things. So it's almost taking a laundry list of, work for 3 weeks. Write down where you spend your hour. Every hour, just write down, I spent this on admin, I spent this on finance, I spent this, and just doing like a catalog of your time, and then looking back and going, I spent a lot of time doing stuff that really doesn't change our outcomes. It makes us run, and it has to be done, but I could probably give that to somebody
I don't
else.
need to be the one doing it.
Yeah, so then that's where you start to break down and build capacity, because it allows you to focus on the mission and the vision and strategy, and you start to offload those things. And almost everybody, when they get a capacity assessment, the first two things they think is, I need to raise more money, I need to hire more staff. That's the only way that we're going to build capacity. And really, to me, it's not. If you get your staff trained, they may be able to work better. If you get the right systems, it may take away some of the work that you spend all your time doing. If you start to bring in pro bono staff to do some of this, look for a pro bono accountant, look for a pro bono lawyer, look for ways to supplement your staff. Because in my experience, every nonprofit that I've been at, when we ask for more money or we ask for more staff, the answer is always no. So when I talk about capacity, I say, let's just stop talking about the illusion that there's more money and more staff.
Okay.
So let's go in two directions. The only way you can do it is supplement your staff, increase the skills of your staff, or look for ways to automate things that your staff shouldn't be doing that a system can do for you.
Okay.
That's where we ended. And that was a really fun conversation. That was the fun part of the conversation to me. Once we get past the gobbledygook of the word capacity and the words organizational capacity, because really what it's all about is, what do you choose to spend your time on? What tasks do you choose as your priorities? And where do you invest the resources that your nonprofit has been given to meet your mission?
What kind of questions did you get?
The questions I got from the audience were really about, a lot about the tools. Which tools should I use? Of course, that's where we started. The other one, though, was, what do you do when leadership stands in the way and doesn't want to change? Or what do you do when the organization is so small that these tools get...
Oh, wait. Don't just rattle off the
I'm
questions.
rationalizing off
Don't just rattle off the questions. What's the answer?
What was
The first one, the leadership. Leadership is resistant.
Yeah, so I think when leadership is resistant to this, I think the best way to do it is to celebrate small wins. So arguing with the leadership and trying to prove your point usually doesn't work. So I think the way I've approached this in the past was do small experiments with just the other staff around you, find ways to involve a volunteer or automate a task, and then celebrate it and show, hey, we did this little thing over here and it saved me 3 hours a week, and now I'm able to do this other work. So I think a way to convince leadership is to prove success when you change capacity on your own, and then eventually you can show them that it's worthwhile for them to spend time on.
Okay, maybe bite it off in a small bit and do a test and show the improvement.
Yeah, exactly.
On a small level. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We got time for one more question that you were asked, but of course you got to provide the answer.
So the last one, since this is a technology conference, is, does it make sense to do a technology specific assessment? And I think that's another way to answer the first question. So one of the ways that you can get around, if somebody doesn't want to do a full organization assessment, there are some great ways to have somebody just come in, look at your technology setup, hire a vendor or ask one of your board members if they have a solid IT person, have them come in, do an inventory of your IT, look at your tech strategy. And I think that's a simple way to start to prove the worthwhileness of spending time looking at capacity, is just to start with a technology capacity assessment and just have a vendor come in and do it for you. It's not all that expensive. If you can find it pro bono, it's very effective too.
Okay, we're going to leave it there.
Yeah.
Steve Heye, thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope I didn't confuse you too much.
No, it's a good overview. I mean, it's a dense topic, but
it is. It's really dense.
You broke it down well for the small organ.
Good.
Steve Heye, he's the solution consultant at NetSuite. Thank you again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. This interview is sponsored by Network for Good, easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. And you are with Tony Martignetti, nonprofit radio coverage of 18 NTC. We're wrapping up our coverage right now, this interview. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.